Your typical ranch with roommates is better for your health and it's cheaper. But I know you're stronger than that. The cheapest way to get around in the city is gonna be, you'd be spending almost $200 a month. You could even go as low as spending $0. And I just spent like $17 on this. The bare minimum that you need to live in New York City is, oh my God. Hey there. I don't know why I thought it would be a good idea to start this video on my fire escape, because I guess it feels very New York. But anyway, if you're worried, we're not gonna stay here for the whole video. As I like to make those videos, we're gonna take a little tour around parts of the city and we're gonna talk about different things that you can spend money on. Also, I have the sun in my eyes. This is lovely. Okay, this is slightly better so I don't have to stare directly at the sun. Everyone always says that New York City is so expensive. But how expensive exactly? Who can actually afford to live here? I think the answer might surprise you. But anyway, today I'm gonna break it down for you, because I've heard many times people tell me how much I needed to make in order to survive here. And I'm here to break some of these myths, because in a lot of cases I find them extremely unhelpful and discouraging for anyone who is looking to move here or even living here, making them feel bad. So first of all, if you're new here, hi, my name is Elle. I'm 29. I live in New York City. I'm originally from France, but I've lived here for the past 7 years. On this channel, I talk about living in New York City, living a simple yet intentional life, and living on a budget, or at least living below your means. That's my whole goal in life, is to not let lifestyle creep up on me. And I've lived here on a pretty wide range of salaries, so I've had to budget at different levels. So thinking about that wide range of salaries, I thought it would be interesting to look at a realistic budget for different salaries and break those down into multiple categories of spending. So today we're going to be looking at a 40K salary, which is roughly around how much I made when I first moved to New York, and everyone told me it was impossible to live here with this little money. Then we're gonna look at a 100K salary, which is also gonna be my personal budget because it's how much I make. And then we're gonna be looking at a 150K salary, which obviously there's people in New York who make a lot more money than that, but I think those different scales are going to be pretty representative of, if you're looking to move to New York, what you might have to work with. And at the end, we'll add the total of all the budgets and you can see exactly how much you need to live here. But enough of this little fire escape talk. Let's go back inside. So I divided my categories of spending into 3 categories, and we're going to start by the first one, which is the essentials, starting with housing, aka how much it costs to live in one of these that people who don't live in New York commonly call shoeboxes. They're expensive shoeboxes. So housing is going to be your largest category of spending, which I feel like is common and applicable to really anywhere you live in the world, unless you're lucky and you were gifted a house or an apartment. But that's not my case. So when it comes to your rent, how much you pay in New York City is widely going to vary depending on the borough and the neighborhood. I'm going to talk a little bit more about Brooklyn specifically here, because that's where I've always lived since I moved here, and that's what I know a little bit more. But there are neighborhoods that are cheaper than others in any of the boroughs, even in Manhattan. I live in this apartment, which is a 3-bedroom. Mind you, one of the bedroom is so tiny, like so tiny that I don't think it should be considered a bedroom. But I share this apartment with my boyfriend, so we split the rent in half. Our rent recently just increased to $4,300, so we each pay $2,150. I live in Greenpoint, in case it wasn't obvious. I feel like if you watch my videos and you live in New York, you probably know by now. But it's a fairly expensive neighborhood, and it has gotten a lot more expensive over the past few years. I'm not gonna get too in the weeds when it comes to specific neighborhoods on where you should live. I feel like that could be a whole video in itself, but I'll put a list here of all the neighborhoods that I would consider moving to. if that's helpful at all. So first and foremost, if you're on the lower end of the budget, you will likely have to live with roommates. That's the unfortunate reality of living in the city on a lower salary. It's really hard to afford a place by yourself. If you're going to live by yourself in the most affordable neighborhoods, you would, even for a studio or a small one-bedroom apartment, have to pay at least $2,000, going up to $3,000 or $4,000 if you go to the more upscale neighborhoods. But again, here you can always find a gem. You can always get lucky. So just get on Street Easy or Zillow and just browse to see what's available. If you live with roommates, it's going to be a lot more affordable. So what I usually recommend people do when they first move to the city is to find a sublet and see if you like the apartment, and then you'll likely have an opportunity to either get on the lease or re-sign the lease with the other roommates. That's personally what I did actually for this apartment. I originally subletted one of the bedrooms, and then all of my roommates moved and I ended up on the lease, and then I ended up having Aaron, my boyfriend, move in here with me. So Roomie is an app that I found really helpful to find a room or to find a sublet. And when I was just looking for bedrooms to rent, I also really like to look at different Facebook groups. I feel like Gypsy Housing is the most known one, but you also have different groups for different neighborhoods, so you can check what people are posting on there. However, I would really recommend that you do your due diligence when it comes to any app or Facebook group or anything like that, and actually go see the place, actually go talk to the people. Never rent anything without having seen the place, because there's a lot of scammers on the internet. So your typical range with roommates is going to be between $1,200 and $1,800. Again, it could go even higher if you're in a very expensive neighborhood. Also, one thing to know is that historically, prices are lower in the winter, but there's also less supply. So in the summer, you'll have more options, but it will be slightly more expensive. In the winter, slightly less options, but cheaper. So looking at our different salaries here, I put $1,200 for the 40K salary. You'll find plenty of options in that price range. For my budget, like I said, I paid $2,150 for my share of the rent. And then for the 150K salary, I put $3,000. Again, that could be if you're living by yourself or if you have a really expensive apartment with a partner or roommates. I also want to mention the utilities. So our internet and our electricity come out to be about $100 every month per person, but that's because we have a fairly big place. If you were to split with roommates, it would be much cheaper. So here I put $50 for the 40K salary, $100 for my budget, and $150 for the 150K salary, just assuming utilities would be more expensive if you live by yourself or if you're in a bigger apartment. And then while we're at it, let's talk about phone bills. So you could get a really cheap plan for $15 or $20, I believe. I pay more for my phone bill just because I'm also paying for my actual phone. My phone got stolen last year, so I needed a new phone. So for the 40K salary, I put $20 here. My budget is $140, and for the 150K salary, I put $150. Again, that would be if you want the newest phone and you get on a payment plan for it. So I was going to take the train to go get groceries, but turns out the G train does not work on the weekends. What's new? But before we head to get groceries, I wanted to talk about transportation. Obviously, if you live in New York, you're going to be spending some money on transportation. So aside from walking, the cheapest way to get around in the city is going to be the subway or the bus. They're the same price, which is $2.90 for one trip. They're trying to phase out the Metro card, so I don't even think they're available anymore, or at least they won't be soon. What we do instead is actually tap to pay, which is extremely convenient. And after 12 trips, it will be free. So one trip is $2.90. So if you take the train 6 times a week, let's say commuting to work back and forth, it will come to a total of about $140. Obviously, if you do less than that, then it'll be cheaper. But basically, you're capped at $140. So for our budgets here, for the 40K salary, assuming that you need to get into work pretty much every day of the week and that you need to commute, I put 140, which would be maxing out how much you can pay for the MTA. I give myself a $40 budget, and that's only because I work fully remote, so I barely ever take transportation. I walk a lot and I take the train very sporadically on the weekend. And then I put $200 for the 150K salary, taking into account that someone who has a larger budget might take Ubers or Lyfts. So that would include some subway or bus rides and some Ubers or Lyfts. But now let's talk about a very essential part of your budget, which is your grocery budget. So let me tell you about how much food costs and how to not blow your budget on it. When you live in New York City, your food budget can really spiral. If you order takeout and eat at restaurants all the time, it's really going to explode your budget. So cooking at home a lot is going to be the best way for you to save money. I also believe that being able to cook for yourself is a skill that anyone should have, and it will save you a lot of money in the long term. So this is not a Trader Joe's ad, but I do find that by shopping at Trader Joe's, I'm able to keep a lower grocery budget. So let's take another look at our salaries here. And personally, the minimum I was ever able to spend on groceries was about $200 a month. And again, that was by shopping at Trader Joe's and really focusing on buying simple products and whole foods, because those are the cheapest items always. If you start buying prepackaged food and processed food, it's going to cost you more money, and also it's not good for you. So it's just better to cook with raw ingredients because it's better for your health and it's cheaper. For my budget, so 100K, I put $300 just because I allow myself a little more budget so I can buy more meat, sometimes buy fish, just kind of those more expensive products, just because I can. And then finally, for the 150K salary, I put $600. And the reason why I put $600 is because if you shop at kind of like neighborhood markets and smaller supermarkets or more expensive supermarkets, and you're not as selective with where you shop, the price of groceries can really skyrocket. I find that at regular supermarkets, you'll just get a few items and it will be so expensive, and that's where you have to really get smart with where you shop. There are a lot of places where you can find more affordable groceries, but you really have to benchmark and explore the different options that you have available to you to find the best price on different items. You might have a supermarket that has cheaper meats and a supermarket that has cheaper produce. Really try to strategize so you can keep the cost of your groceries low. And now let's head to Target so we can talk about house supplies. So technically you could get your house supplies wherever you shop for groceries. I just get all of my house supplies and like toiletries at Target just because I find that it's the cheapest. And for anything that's like house supplies, I usually go for the Up and Up brand, which is the Target name brand. And I find that it's just the best quality for the price. Again, I'm sure there are other options, but that's why I have kind of a dedicated Target budget. I feel like I'm promoting so many brands in this video and I'm not gonna get any money for it. But yeah, so I usually like to separate those two budgets because, again, to my point when I was talking about groceries, I feel like you need to strategize where you shop for different things based on where it's the cheapest. And first of all, Trader Joe's doesn't really have that many house supplies, and also I find that anything like toilet paper, multi-purpose cleaner, paper towels, dish soap, all of these things are just more expensive at regular supermarket than they are at Target. And Target has a lot of locations in the city now. I'm actually at the Court Square location right now, which I believe opened fairly recently. And yeah, so while I'm here, I'm gonna get a couple things. I might also get some candles because it's August 15th. Is it too early for fall candles? Only time will tell. So for our budgets here, I put $50 for both the 40K salary and my budget, so the 100K salary. And then I put $100 for the 150K salary. Again, that's just assuming that you'd be buying house supplies at a regular supermarket, which tends to be more expensive. I feel like I'm being naughty right now because it's way too early for fall candles, but they have some. Can I? Should I? Okay, so now I think it's finally time to go get some coffee. So now, let's move on to another section of the budget that I named Living Well. Because as much as you might think that all you need to live is food and shelter and being able to get from point A to point B, it's kind of unrealistic to think that anyone can sustain a lifestyle where you only have the essentials. That's not living, that's just surviving. I think it's important to set aside money that makes life feel good. And it doesn't have to be a lot of money, it just needs to be targeted towards things that are really, really important to you and make you feel really good. How you determine those things is entirely up to you, and it's going to really vary from one person to the other, but it does require checking in with yourself and cultivating self-awareness. Because no matter how much money you set aside for that section of the budget, spending it on the right things is really what's going to keep you from feeling deprived. So I know that coffee is not going to be a category for everybody, but to me it's a religion, so I'm going to talk about it. If you drink coffee, you're going to want to enjoy the occasional coffee shop outing. And as outrageously expensive as coffee can be in the city, it's still much cheaper than going out to a restaurant or getting drinks. And I know it's not the same experience, but I find that it's a great way to still spend time outside of your apartment and explore the city, just trying out different coffee shops, you know, instead of costing you $50 to $100 to go to a restaurant. You can explore all the coffee shops in New York for $5 to $7 each. So I find that exploring coffee shops is actually a relatively affordable way of exploring the city. And honestly, even in coffee shops that don't have food, you can usually bring your own meal. So sometimes I'll go to a coffee shop that doesn't serve food and I'll just bring my own little sandwich that I made at home. So for the $40K salary, I put $30 towards coffee outings every month. That would equate to about one coffee out a week, which I feel like is pretty reasonable, and you could still get to enjoy that part of the city. For the $100K salary, I actually put 50. That's just a little bit more than once a week. I feel like making coffee at home at that stage is still what you should do most of the time. I personally work from home and work remote, so I go out to coffee shops pretty much every single day of the week, but that's because my company covers the cost of coffee if I'm working from a coffee shop. And then for the $150K salary, I kind of went all the way and put $180, which means you'd be getting coffee out every single day. Honestly, even if I made $150K, I don't think I would do that. I kind of went the extreme here. But it's kind of crazy to think that if you did get coffee out every single day, you'd be spending almost $200 a month on just coffee. That's like the $40K salary grocery budget. But anyway, let's take this coffee and walk around a little bit. So we went straight from coffee to cocktails. Just kidding. I did have lunch in between. But now let's talk about our eating out and drinking out budgets, because if you want to experience New York City to the fullest, it is nice to be able to eat out and drink out, if you drink, every now and then. However, here again, it's all about moderation and also where you go, because it's so easy when you live here to fall into the habit of going out all the time, going out to drink or to eat multiple times a week, and then you end up spending hundreds of dollars on drinks and food every single month. To be honest, that's kind of what the city is pushing you to do, but I know you're stronger than that. I know you can fight it. You just have to be creative, and you just have to be smarter when it comes to spending time outside of your apartment. And I just spent like $17 on this Aperol Spritz, which was not smart, but I'm trying to make a point here. I'll give you a little example of something that I do when I go on dates with my boyfriend that I can't directly recommend you do, But every Sunday, we like to go on our little walk, or very long walk sometimes, and we'll buy a bottle of wine, put it in little insulated cups, and just walk around with our beer or our wine. And that's honestly one of the loveliest type of dates that we have, and it costs very little. And I know it's illegal to drink out and about, but if you're sleek about it and you're not bothering anyone and you're not getting drunk on the street and you put it in a little cute container, you should be okay. Again, I'm not advising you do that. But back to our budget. If you're on the 40K salary, I would recommend that you don't spend more than $50 a week on going out and drinking out, which unfortunately in most places, a drink, once you add tips and tax, will roughly be about $20 if you get a cocktail. And for a meal in a restaurant, if you order a main and maybe a little appetizer, it will also be about $20 to $30 once you include tips and tax. So with $50 a week, you can go out to eat one time and get one drink outside one time. But like I said, if you go to more reasonable places and you buy cheaper drinks and cheaper meals, you can stretch your budget and get a lot more out of it. I've said this in previous videos, but you really have to research your neighborhood. You have to find your spots, your high reward, low cost spots, because every single neighborhood has those, but you have to dig a little bit and explore so you can find those little gems. For my budget, I put $300. I personally don't eat out at restaurants a lot, but I like my little cocktails and little glass of wine at a bar with my friends. So that's where most of my budget goes. And then when it comes to eating out, specifically in the summer, what I like to do is make sandwiches and go do a little picnic. And then for the 150K salary, I put $600. You could get even higher than that if you really don't pay attention and you go out all the time. It's so easy to reach $1,000 a month on going out, drinking out. There's really no limit. You just have to be very aware of where your money is going when it comes to that, because it just goes so fast. So since we so happen to be sitting right in front of one of my favorite vintage stores, we might as well talk about clothing and personal care. So I feel like when it comes to clothing specifically, if you buy your clothes new, I guess they're pretty much the same price anywhere in the US. But if you're like me and you like thrifting, it's slightly more expensive in the city. However, for this spending category, just like I have been saying for pretty much everything in this video, and if you know me a little bit and you've seen a few of my videos, you know that I'm pretty anti-consumerism to begin with. So when it comes to clothing, I have a pretty minimal approach. And that doesn't mean that I don't buy new clothes ever. I do. But I'm very mindful about how I do it. I thrift pretty much everything that I buy when it comes to clothes, not only because you find more unique things, but also because it's more affordable. Unless you buy clothes at H&M or Forever 21, which is a whole different ethical and conscious issue that I'm not even going to bring up in this video. But I personally don't do that. I don't really think it's smart budget-wise anyway, just because the clothes that you buy there likely won't last you very long. When it comes to buying basics, I'll sometimes invest a bit more in high-quality and sustainable brands like Quince or Everlane, just because I know those pieces will last me a lifetime, or if not a lifetime, a really long time. And when it comes to how I use this budget, I will also sometimes put it towards other things like cutting my hair, getting my nails done. I really like getting my nails done, but that doesn't necessarily happen every single month. And I also here have found my spots and my little neighborhoods, cheap places where I could get that done. So if we look at our budgets here, for the 40K salary, I put $50 a month, which I think is enough if you want to buy a few things in a thrift store. And if you don't use that budget every month, you can kind of roll it over and maybe buy more expensive pieces if you need a jacket for the winter or anything like that. For my own budget, I set aside $100. And then for the 150K salary, I put $300. That's if you bought significantly more clothes or maybe got other things done, like, I don't know, waxing or getting your eyelashes done. I don't really know what girls do because I'm not a very girly girl like that. but that also saves me a lot of money. I also have an entertainment budget, which includes anything that's for entertainment that isn't one of the categories that I've already mentioned. So things like museum visits, music events, going to the movie theater. Again, here I really encourage you to try to find the cheap options. I feel like I sound like a broken record. I've been saying the same thing the whole video, so you probably get it by now. But what I'll say is that there are actually a lot of free events in the city, and if you do your research, you'll be able to find a ton. There's always random store openings where you could get free drinks and art exhibits and free music events, like literally on the street. So just walk around, explore, and I'm pretty sure that you can find ways to be entertained without spending a ton of money. So when it comes to the 40K salary entertainment budget, I put $50, which is actually how much I have on my budget for that section as well, for literally all the reasons that I just said. For the 150K salary, I put $200 because, again, here, kind of using this as an extreme, but there are many ways that you can spend a lot of money on entertainment. Okay, so now what do you say we go get a little workout session in before we go back to my apartment and unwind for the day? Yes, you guessed it. I want to talk about our health and wellness budget. Obviously, I need to go change. I'm not going to work out in this outfit. Wouldn't it be funny, though, if I had just a full workout outfit underneath these clothes the whole time? Kind of like Superman? No. So for your working out budget, I don't think you need to break the bank here to free up some budget for your health and wellness. You could even go as low as spending $0 if you don't want to sign up for a gym or don't want to sign up for workout classes. I personally like the gym because, first of all, I like to weight train, but also I find it kind of difficult to work out in your apartment when you live in a tiny New York City apartment. I feel like for my mental health, I need to work out somewhere else in my apartment. But there are gyms that are pretty affordable. And if you go for the lower price range, you might not have the best gym ever. But most of the time, I have found that you'll have just what you need to do your workout and get out. I used to go to Crunch Fitness, which is, I think, $20 a month because that was just the cheapest in my neighborhood. I upgraded slightly. I actually used to go to a gym that was $130 a month, which was a really nice gym. But first of all, it was really expensive. And then this gym where I'm at right now, which is Vibe Fitness, opened earlier this year. And I got a really good deal because they were just opening. So I pay $65 a month. I know that people who are signing up now pay, I think, $90 a month. So I got a pretty good deal here, and I'm very happy because this is a really nice gym. But you could go all the way to a gym like Lifetime or Equinox. Honestly, really love Lifetime. My boyfriend's brother actually works there, and it's amazing. But I digress. You can pay up to $300 or $400 a month for a gym if you want to, if you choose to. I honestly get why people would choose to spend their money there if they can afford it. Just because, again, I really think this is such an important part of your lifestyle and your overall well-being, mentally and physically. So let's look at our budgets. For 40K salary, I put $20. There are a lot of gyms in the city that are $20 a month. Again, I can't vouch on how great they are, but you usually have just what you need to get a workout in. For the 100K salary, my salary, I put $65 because that's how much I pay for this gym. And then for our lucky 150K salary, I put $300, which I believe is a Lifetime or Equinox membership. Might be more expensive. I think they have different price ranges. So that's that. But now I'm going to stop pretending like I was working out and go home so we can finalize a few things and look at our total budgets. All right, we're back at my apartment. I changed back into regular clothes. I feel like the narrative of this video is starting to not make sense at all. But I have one last section of the budget that I called the boring stuff. A few things to consider that you'll likely need a budget for. First of all, I forgot to talk about subscription, which is something I made its own category of spending because I feel like we all kind of have streaming platforms or random entertainment subscriptions. Even if you're on the lower end of the budget, it is nice to have a couple of streaming platforms at least. What I personally do is I actually switch them up. Like, I'll have Netflix one month and watch everything that I want to watch on Netflix, and then switch it up to another platform the next month, exhaust that option, and do that again. So for the lowest budget, I put $20. For my budget, I actually have $50, but I also have a couple of subscriptions for my YouTube channel. And then for the highest salary, I put $100, which is probably, if you got every subscription and streaming service under the sun, it might actually be more expensive than that, but $100 is a good amount. So the first boring item is going to be medical expenses. It's not boring per se, but you should have a budget for the occasional copay. Honestly, this is all hoping that you have insurance through your job, because if you don't, then that's a whole nother can of worms I'm not going to open today. For this one, for all of the budgets, I put $50. That would be about one doctor's visit a month, and there might be a month where you don't need it at all. I also have a pet care section, which is not going to apply to everybody. Not everyone has a pet, but I do have a dog, so I included it. For the 40K salary, I put $0 because I don't think it's very realistic to have a pet at that salary. If you live in the city, vet bills can be extremely expensive, food is expensive. For my dog, I spent about $150 a month. And then for the 150K salary, I put $400, which is assuming that you use one of those expensive meal plans like the Farmer's Dog or Maeve or whatever. And then last but not least, it is important, whatever salary you're on, to save and set money aside, whether it's to pay some existing debt or just save money for a rainy day. Even if you're on the 40K salary, the budget that I created still leaves you with $470. And you know, that amount of money can make a difference in the long run if you're saving it every single month rather than living paycheck to paycheck and not being prepared when anything happens to you. With my salary, I actually aim to save at least $2,000 a month. And then what's interesting is that for the 150K salary, I kind of used it as an extreme, but an extreme that a lot of people who live in the city reach. The leftover money is actually less than mine for my 100K salary. It's $1970, but it just goes to show that even if you make more money, you can very easily spend a lot more. And honestly, it is kind of baffling to me, but there are people who make this amount of money and live paycheck to paycheck. I really tried to max out a lot of the different things, but I still didn't find a way to spend all of that. So now, finally, let's add up all of these budgets and look at our totals. So for our lowest salary, the bare minimum that I think you need to live in New York City is $2,130, which is what our 40K salaries budget totaled up to. My total budget, so for the 100K salary, is $3,645. And then our 150K's budget totaled up to $6,330. Which is insane, but we did use it as an extreme. We did. It's crazy how much money you have if you make 150K. This is just a reminder that, first of all, you don't need as much money as some people might tell you to live in New York City and live here to potentially work your way up to a higher salary, which is what I did. But also a reminder that if you do make more money, you can choose to not spend all of it and to save and invest it for your future, for peace of mind. If you feel comfortable, I would love for you to let me know in the comments how much you make and how much you spend. I really hope that you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye bye.